In 2007, the Wooster Group, a media-based devised theatre group from New York City, mounted a production of Hamlet. Like most theatre groups, they tackled works by major playwrights Anton Chekhov, Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams, and, of course, Shakespeare. But being a devised theatre group means that rather than sticking strictly to the script, they use it as a starting point, often including other materials to build a performance that sometimes adheres closely to the source material and sometimes veers off to explore other avenues. What's interesting about their version of Hamlet is that the text they used was not strictly Shakespeare's text, but a film version of the play. In 1964, John Gielgud directed Richard Burton as Hamlet on Broadway. It remains one of the most successful productions of Hamlet Broadway has ever seen, running for 137 performances. To capitalise on this runaway success, the production was filmed and then screened at over 1,000 movie theatres around the US. Today, we see big theatres like London's The National and the Metropolitan Opera regularly screening their latest productions in cinemas, but in 1964 it hadn't been done before. The 1964 film was a major success, but one destined not to be repeated, as Burton ordered all copies of the print destroyed after the screenings. It turned out all but one. After his death, a copy was discovered in Burton's personal effects and released on VHS. Yes, this was a while ago. The Wooster Group used that 1964 videotape as the material on which to build their performance. So why choose this particular version of Hamlet? It has to do with a concept I'm calling theatrical authenticity. This is borrowed from Philip Auslander's concept of rock authenticity, the idea that certain performances and forms of music are more worthy of our respect and consideration because of their ability to perform live. This, of course, is a myth. All rock music is heavily mediatised through use of amplification, and the performances of most rock bands are experienced by audiences through the filter of their studio-recorded work. The same can be said of certain actors and directors. We ascribe extra value to those who perform Shakespeare, who star in independent over popular films, those who have a background in the stage or regularly visit that medium, and, until recently, privileged film over TV. The 1964 production was a landmark production, directed by and starring two well-known, classically trained Shakespearean actors, being performed on Broadway. The whole thing has a sense of gravitas few productions gain, but it is unlikely that the production would have gained quite so much commercial attention had it not been for the film careers of its star and director. Indeed, one of the primary reasons young undergraduate student and future Wooster Group director Elizabeth Lecomte took her mother to see Burton's performances of Hamlet on Broadway was to admire Burton himself, in the flesh, and possibly to capture a glimpse of Burton's new wife, Elizabeth Taylor. They did, by the way, see Elizabeth Taylor coming out of the stage door after the show, every inch the Hollywood star they were expecting. It's also interesting to note that the cover art for the movie bills the production as Richard Burton's Hamlet, playing off the pedigree of the star rather than the author or director. It features the cover of the playbill for the production, hammering home the idea that this is an authentic theatrical production, not just another movie. As with all Wooster Group productions, they do occasionally deviate from their original source material, but only to include footage of equal authenticity. Bill Murray as Polonius and Charlton Heston as the player King are used at certain moments to break up the continuous flow of the Burton movie. It is never made clear why they throw in these brief glimpses of other Hamlets, or why these particular productions, but it does serve to illustrate just how often and how wide-ranging the actors that have participated in it can be. A search of IMDb turns up over 200 instances of Hamlet, going back as far as 1910, from all corners of the globe, pun intended, in a myriad of different styles. As a cornerstone of theatrical canon, you'd be hard-pressed to find a play more widely restaged than Hamlet. At this point, the Wooster Group themselves had gained a level of authenticity themselves, starting as an experimental group in the 70s. By the early 2000s, they had garnered enough critical and popular attention to rank among the well-established and well-respected theatre groups in New York City. Therefore, the effect of them performing Burton and Gielgud's work is not one of an upstart group doing a cover version, but a well-respected theatrical troupe performing an homage. So how do you stage a filmed version of a play? If you're the Wooster group, you mimic everything you see on screen. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Not just the movements, speeches, fights, entrances, exits, but the jump cuts, the panning, the zooming in on people's faces. The fact that the Wooster group have the ability to play with these conventions is predicated on the fact that we, as an audience who have grown up in a media-driven culture, understand the visual language of cinema. Just as we need to be aware of the theatrical authenticity of Shakespeare, Hamlet, Burton and Corbould, we need to be aware of these filming conventions in order to understand the gimmick of the production. But being the Wooster group, they still have that rebellious experimental streak. So they do not simply perform the production exactly as it recorded, what they give us is a remix. At the outset, Scott Shepherd, who plays Burton/Hamlet, explains how they treated the video material, cutting and editing it, speeding up the passages, removing pauses and adding them in elsewhere, and even adding material from other versions of Hamlet, in the same way that rap artists demonstrate their love for the R&B artists they grew up with by cutting them into their tracks. So here do the Wooster group reassemble a piece of theatrical history to create a piece that is once entirely their own, yet acknowledging the original. So as well as our awareness of film styles and conventions, we need to have some awareness of editing conventions as well. As mentioned before, Shepherd does not explain that the process by which he has edited the original material, but the presentation of this knowledge only works within the production convention if we are aware that film is an edited medium to begin with. This lends the Wooster group production, at times, a slightly odd, almost parody-like feel, as the live actors shuffle backwards and forwards across the stage, dashing suddenly to the front for a close-up, then receding just as suddenly for a medium shot. This serves to highlight how we accept the conventions of film without question. In the Burton original, the jump cuts, panning, zooming, become invisible to us, as par for the film course. When aped by live actors on stage, it becomes strange to watch. Doubly so when the footage is set to fast forward. When researching this production, I found it interesting that although the Wooster group played with the film conventions Burton's Hamlet employed, their own archival footage was filmed from a single camera angle, taken in the entire stage and not moving at all, more akin to the film practices of early cinema than those contemporary or even from the 60s. What Shepherd doesn't mention is the gradual erasure of the original actors from the footage itself. From the beginning, they established a convention of removing the speech from the material, leaving live on-stage voices heard above the recorded, apart from a few key moments where the recorded voices are distorted, reverb added, and amplified for effect. Burton in particular was well known for the melodious quality of his voice, a deep baritone with a lilting Welsh accent. A large part of his performance is predicated on his speech rhythms and caesuras, or pauses. As the performance goes on, not only the audio but the visual images of the characters are removed from the screen digitally, substituting the background for the actors. By the end of the play, the final duel between Hamlet and Laertes is performed by two squares moving across the screen. Although allegedly recreating Burton's performance, the Wooster group never rise above straightforward mimicry, nor do they aspire to. During an interview with Auslander, founding Wooster group performer and film star Willem Dafoe discusses that the Wooster group approach to acting is one of a non-matrixed performance. This means that at no point do the performers aim to completely embody their characters or leave you with the impression that they have become that character. At all stages of the performance, you're encouraged to remember that this is an actor playing a part, performing actions but in no way connecting with the emotions of the character is supposedly feeling. The frequent breaking out of character to address the audience, explain the technical aspects of the production process, and even the actors talking amongst themselves have long been hallmarks of the Wooster group productions, and serve to create this remove between the actors and the characters they are portraying. What we are left with is less a faithful recreation of the original material than a ghost version, alluded to but with all the flesh stripped from its bones, a shadow very much like the shadow on the back wall cast by Corbould as he plays the ghost of Hamlet's father. Because, in essence, we will never get back the corporeality of the original, the Wooster group's recreation of Burton's original reminds us that live performance is fleeting, leaving us only a ghost haunting our memories.